We're going to be talking about how the mind and the body interact. I can't think of two guys that are better to do that than yourself, a sports psychologist, and myself, a sports medicine physician for the past 25 years. Great to have you today.
It's great to see you, Dr. Dan. I agree with you. This, to me, is one of my most favorite topics. If I reflect back on all the people that I work with, this probably is the dominant or overarching theme that we tend to want the athlete or the individual to adopt and understand. And I think once they're bought in, like once they've not only accepted it, but embraced the fact that that's how it actually works, that the mind and body are like intertwined, they're linked together, that it makes a big difference. It enables them to, I think, utilize every other tool, everything that we teach, everything we're trying to like help them with. I think it just makes it all better once they have this education and they have this understanding of the mind and body connection. So let's jump right in.
For 25 years as a sports medicine physician, taking care of people with the body, I mean, as far as knee issues, back issues, sports performance, it took me a long time in my career to understand exactly how the mind has such a huge part of performance and improvement, not only in just getting better at their sport, but recovery from injuries, their confidence, their ability to overcome anxiety, the yips. There's lots of different things that we can talk about as far as how the mind and the body actually work together. So very, very excited about this topic. I think it's one that both you and I, it's how we met each other and how our relationship came about, was dealing with how do athletes who have, whether it's an injury or want to be better at sports, how they do that. And that's how you and I started talking. So it's great to be doing this podcast on that very topic.
What I think is the most important part of the mind and body connection, and that is that the mind and body are so interlinked that they must align with each other. What do I mean? I always go back to this cliched question of which comes first, the chicken or the egg? So with the mind-body connection, it's which comes first, the mind or the body? And when I say it's a two-way switch, it's a two-way switch. They are intertwined and they must align. So think about that. They are intertwined and they must align. So if you think about it like this, that the mind has a light switch and a light bulb. The body has a light switch and a light bulb, and they're connected. There's a pathway between them. So whether we turn on something in the mind, we turn on that switch and it lights up the mind, it sends the signal over to the body, turns on the switch and lights up the body. If you light up the body, turn on that switch, it sends signal over and lights up the mind. Here's what I mean. If you try to distinguish which comes first, either one can come first, but the moment one is turned on or activated, it will activate the other. They must align. I literally just got done doing a coaching session where I was explaining this concept to somebody, and I was going back to say, my wife is a kindergarten teacher, and if I walked into her classroom and I was just acting, but I could not say words, and I went to the students and I slouched over in my chair and put my head down and breathed shallow and looked like this. And I asked the students, I said, how do I feel? I think everybody without question would say, you're sad, or some version of sad. And then if I went, they'd say, you're happy. And I'd be like, how do you know? Because everybody knows that. The moment you're probably of some level of intellect, that's why I use kindergarten as the example, like in everybody moving forward, we all know this. It's like the body is representing how we feel. There's two sayings that I always say is, one is physiology, or the use of your body, creates feelings. Physiology creates feelings. The other one comes from Tony Robbins. He says, emotion is created through motion or movement, the use of our body. So emotion is created through motion. Physiology creates feelings. And there's a really cool study that they did, and you probably have many examples of this, Dr. Dan, or you're familiar with it, which is they went into a college, and you know how these studies work in colleges where students don't know exactly the topic. If they did, it would bias the study. And they put electrodes on people's brains, and they call this the pen experiment. And they asked them to do different things with pens, and they saw how their brain reacted to it. So in one example, they said, everybody take the pen and put it in your mouth and bite down on it. And when they did that, what are they doing? They're smiling, right? So are you doing a smile? And I teach that your brain is literally a pharmacist, but it's the best pharmacist in the world, because unlike a pharmacist or a doctor like you, Dr. Dan, who could prescribe medication, you got to figure out until you get it right, right? You got to figure out what's the right dosage. And every drug that you could get from a pharmacist comes with potential side effects. Well, here's the great thing about your mind. Your mind is the perfect pharmacist, because whatever it releases into your bloodstream, those chemicals, it does it in the perfect dosage with no side effects. So by biting down on this pen, we activate the same cheeks. We do all the same things we do when we smile, and it turns on that light switch, the body light switch, and sends a signal over to your mind that says, hey, pharmacist, send the chemicals through my blood to make me feel happy. So it's not just a feeling, it's real. You feel the way that you use your body, and your body will represent the way you feel. So which comes first? Either one. But I think the important takeaway that I would want to get across to everybody is simply this. You do not have to wait to feel anything. You can create how you feel by using your body. The same way those students could just simply go into the act of smiling, and it would tell their brain, their mind, to send the happy chemicals through their blood. You don't have to wait for something happy to happen for it to send a signal over saying, now you can smile. You're allowed to smile because something good happened. You can smile for no reason and then create those real feelings in your body, because it works both ways. So I always say, don't try to think your way out of a bad state. Don't try to think your way into feeling good. Don't try to make it logical. I recommend body first, then lead to the mind. We're not passively waiting on the mind to represent something or see something in the world that allows us to feel something. And then the body would just wait and then lines up accordingly. We can use the body first and then allow the mind to take its proper action as the perfect pharmacist to allow us to feel that way.
That was perfect. This may be a good time on our podcast to talk about the anatomical reasons those things happen. So if you look at what we call the central nervous system, I'm going to call it the CNS for short, but it's basically made up of your brain, your spinal cord, and then there's little nerve endings that go all throughout your body. We call those your peripheral nervous system. So how it really works is your peripheral nervous system senses something in your body. Let me just give you an example of one that'll kind of back up your point. If you are off balance, there are tiny little mechanical stretch receptors in your heel, in your Achilles tendon, that then feeds back through a long system all the way back into your brain and tells your brain that you're swaying back and forth, or you're moving side to side, or you're at an angle. When it goes to your brain, it goes to your inner ear. Your inner ear, about 1,000 times a second, tells you where you are in space. Your brain then senses what came from the body and then makes the adjustment in your core muscles to adjust your balance. It all started in your body. It went to your brain. Your brain then reacted off of the body to make adjustments very quickly. That's exactly what you're talking about. If you have a posture, or if you have an emotion, if you have a feeling, and your body feels a certain way or looks a certain way, slouched shoulders, head down, chest down, then your brain senses that, and it feels as though it is in a down mood. It's getting that input from the peripheral nervous system all the time, and it then reacts to that. And it makes sense, Dan, if you think about it like this. You wouldn't want your brain to have to tell your body when and if it's out of kilter without feeling it from the outside, from the extremities, or it would be too late. So your extremities feel that balance change, goes to your brain very fast, makes the adjustment, and then boom. So I've learned from you, and you've taught me this, that the body has so much to do with the brain, as opposed to what I think myself and probably 99% of the population thought. Your brain is always telling your body how to feel, how to move. And it's very much, in a lot of cases, your body telling the brain, and they work together. They're in conjunction. Just like I said, your brain, your spinal cord, and your peripheral nerves all work together to go and listen to the body, but the body is the one making the adjustments or making those things happen, and then your brain adjusts to it.
I think we're in perfect alignment with, you just gave a much more detailed medical explanation behind what I've learned and what I work with people on and teach them. And I think if I were to try to bring this back to sports for 1 second, I will say that we'll use baseball, when you strike out, clearly that would put you into a negative emotional state. You're going to be some form of a negative emotion. And oftentimes what we do is we look to the mind to solve that problem. So the mind is typically, like, we're just going to say the mind is logical and the body is emotional. The body is feeling, right? The emotional parts. The mind is thinking through, processing, analyzing the logical part. I know that's a super simplistic way of saying it, but so from a logical mind-based perspective, if you struck out, we have an analysis that we're performing. We're sitting there saying, okay, that affects my batting average in a negative way. The only way I can fix that negative thing that just had a batting average is to get another hit. How did that affect my team in this game? We're doing all sorts of logical analysis. So we then, to fix that, we have to have a logical reasoning or explanation to fix it. So then we'd have to then go, okay, I can feel better once I get a hit. Well, the problem with that level of thinking is that until you get a hit, you're doing things that work against your ability to get a hit by maintaining or remaining in that negative state of mind. So if we simply go, I don't have to wait on the mind to come up with a logical explanation or for the world or this game or circumstance to align to let me feel better, I could actually just use my body to feel better. And I know this is super simplistic in this example, but literally just the act of smiling, the act of breathing. And we go deep into this in coaching, but utilizing just these simple things, taking some deep breaths, smiling, will physically allow you, it'll line up. The mind will then line up to start feeling better. And how would you like to feel going into the next at bat? Would you like to feel down? Would you like to be focused on the fact you just got out last time? Would you like to be focused on the fact how it negatively messed up your batting average or how it impacted the team in a bad way? Or would you like to give yourself the ability to go into that at bat fresh, right? Even if it's just level headed or above the line, something positive. Wouldn't you rather do that? So if I could give you one tool, that one tool is simply this: use your body to get you out of that negative frame of mind, that negative emotional state. Go into that next at bat, take some deep breaths, smile, and try to go in fresh like that never happened. And your mind will line up with what you just did with your body, and it gives you the best shot at performing. And then I say it's an upward momentum. They have the word downward spiral. This is an upward momentum we create by simply going, I'm not passively waiting on circumstances to allow me to feel good. I'm going to create good feelings with the use of my body. My brain will align with that. And that gives me my best shot to create more things that put me on the upward momentum that reinforces that good feeling. And I perform better.
That is great, Dan. And I think we can learn from that. I'm going to give you an example that when you first taught me that is one of the things that I looked at. I started thinking of all the great athletes I knew and I had watched over the years, the Albert Pujols, the Mike Trouts, the guys that I played college baseball with who were another level player. And they all had that same stance, that confidence. And I always thought, and I think I thought this wrongly now, that the confidence came from them being good players. But I think that confident pose was who they really were and what they did. And then that promoted their elite play. So I'm going to give an example. Mike Trout, if you think about how Mike Trout stands, probably the greatest baseball player currently on the planet. He always stands, if you think of him standing on deck, his shoulders are back, his chest is out, his head's up. It always seems to be smiling. You would say, well, he's Mike Trout. He's just signed, I don't know, a gazillion-dollar contract, and he's a great baseball player, considered the greatest baseball player right now. But I go back to a story. I watched Mike Trout on his draft day So Major League Baseball Network decided to do this program where they were going to bring in what they thought were the top 10 players, young players, and they were going to have them be in the Major League Baseball Network studio so that when their name was called, there'd be like a joyous celebration. They're kind of trying to mimic what basketball and football does. But baseball is a much different sport. It's hard to predict who they're going to draft. High school players are even harder to predict. Mike Trout was coming out of high school. He's coming out of New Jersey, an area, usually the Northeast is in a big baseball mecca. So he had a lot of things that made him not quite as desirable in the first few rounds. Well, anyway, they thought he was a can't miss player, so they invite him. Well, he's the only one that shows up. He shows up with him and his family. They show up at the studio. And his name doesn't get called in the first pick, doesn't get called in the second pick. And it goes on for a while. Like, I think something like 20-something teams end up not picking Mike Trout. And every time someone is picked, they have the camera on Mike Trout so because he's in the studio with them expecting his name to be called, and then it doesn't get called. And then finally, when it does get called, the Angels finally picked him in lower first round. It was as if he was the most confident player ever. It was as if he had been picked in the first pick, with the first pick. His posture was chest out, shoulders back, head up. He was smiling big time. You would never have known that he was semi-embarrassed. His family was semi-embarrassed because I don't think he was. And I just remember thinking, that confident player when he was a kid, before he was, quote, Mike Trout that we now know Mike Trout, that confidence and that confidence pose and the way he held himself and his body and the way he was smiling, that just carried over into his career. If you look at him now, people think, oh, he's confident because of the success he's had. But guess what? Before he was successful, he was very similar in the way he carried himself and the way he held his pose and the way he was confident. So I can also talk about my 13-year college teammate that did the exact same thing, was always confident as a young player and then carried it out through his Major League Baseball career. And I think the thing that separated him and a lot of the rest of us who were all good ball players in college is the fact that he was always confident. He wasn't looking for the next hit to make him great. He already acted as if he was great, whether he just went 0 for 5 or 5 for 5. It didn't matter. His confidence, his pose, his posture stayed the same, exactly to your point. But I think if you look at the really great ones, they have that innately. Can you develop it? And that's my question for you. If a player doesn't have that to start with, is it something you can teach? Is it something you teach your athletes?
Everything is teachable. Everything somebody can learn, start using if they really want to. I always say there's no limitation with small exceptions. The exceptions would be if you have a true physical limitation, right? An injury or something like that. You have a lot of experience with that. Or you have a mental limitation. But in most people that we both work with, we're able to get to the point where there's no physical or mental limitation. And then literally anything's possible. And if you talk about, I always see things as easy. In fact, like one of the attitudes I give is like, I say like, this is baby games. This is so simple in reality, because if you think about it, what did I just say? I just said you could take a bunch of college kids and you could just have them bite a pen, and they bite a pen and they smile, and then they start to feel happy. Well, what did they do? You didn't even say, be happy, right? Somebody go, it's hard to be happy. No, it's not hard to be happy. Bite a pen, smile, and you'll start to feel happier. And people start to push back and go, it can't be that easy. That doesn't make sense. So going back to your question is like, yes, this stuff is easy. This is baby games. If you're willing to accept how easy it is, then any person, doesn't matter if you're in sports or not, any person could simply, I know it sounds cliche and I know it sounds too good to be true, but you could simply just go around smiling all day. And you will have a happier life. You will see things. Your mind will start to align. It'll send those happy chemicals through your blood. You'll start to have an alignment between mind and body. It's going to go, this person is happy. Please allow them to feel the happiness that they are showing or demonstrating through this smile that they're giving. And everything will seem to be better. Everybody loves that happy-go-lucky person. They're like, man, they're so lucky. Well, maybe they are. Or maybe you just see them happy all the time or most of the time, right? And so what you talked about when you said the ability of these people, these super athletes or these amazing achievers to seem to maintain composure or to stay on the happy side of the spectrum of emotions most of the time. I really think that's as easy as utilizing your body despite or in spite of the fact that circumstances in the world don't align. And baseball, as you know, is the best example. This is cliche at this point, but it's like you're going to get out 7 of 10 times. So if you can maintain a good physical and mental attitude throughout those 7 times you get out, it only supports those 3 times in you getting hits those other 3 times, right? And it only, like I said, creates an upward momentum by being, I stay composed. I maintain this state of mind. So I think anybody could learn it. But I think the biggest obstacle is this skepticism that no, it doesn't work that way. It's not that easy. It can't be that easy, because I think the acknowledgement that it's that easy would make them feel bad that they didn't do it sooner, right? Or make them feel bad about all the missed opportunities because they were waiting passively on circumstances in life to allow them or to justify to them that it's okay to feel good. So I think instead of waiting, let's be active and let's just create it.
That is perfect, Dan. And let me tell the parents out there my mistakes. I'm gonna teach you a little bit on practical mistakes that I made. So when I learned baseball, how I learned baseball was very mechanical driven. Like, you swing a bat this way, you have success. You field the ball this way, you have success. You throw it this way, you have success. And we drill worked mechanics over and over and over and over again. So when I had a son, guess what I did when he started coming up through the ranks? I drilled mechanics. He became a very good mechanics baseball player. But what I never really fully grasped is the importance of exactly what we're talking about. That's the ability to have confidence, stay on the positive side of things, promote positive affirmation thoughts to yourself. Don't let what others think, good or bad, affect your own goals. So what I did is my son went through, and by the way, he had success being a mechanics hitter, but if he got into a slump, guess what? It was devastating for him. He had to wait for the next hit to feel good, because we had focused so heavily on mechanics. We really hadn't focused on how do you control the mental side of the game. And that's where what you do, Dan, is amazing. So I teach young, I'm not just a physician, but I teach young hitters how to hit. And so my nephew came to me, and I just decided, I'd met you, and I just decided, okay, this time I'm doing it differently. We are starting with, how do you carry your body? How do you think about the game? How do you positive affirmations, say great things to yourself when you're hitting? And we don't talk about the negative. We do not emphasize when we hit a bad ball, we don't make a negative sound. We don't say a negative thought. What we do is we say, he has a word, we call it a trigger word. When he hits a great one, he says his word. And so we constantly are promoting the positive. And every time I'll ask him, I say, what did your coach think about your home run? He says, I don't care what my coach thought about my home run. If I care about he thinks what I think he thinks when I do good, I will care what he says or thinks about me when I do bad. In other words, we're always respectful. We always take in the teaching, but at the same time, we know that his positive outlook, being confident in himself, doesn't derive from what others think about him. And that was my question for you, Dan. I think that's where a lot of young players get into trouble. They start caring a lot about what other people think about them, as opposed to focusing on being the best they can be, being a confident player, standing with confident body posture, being a great teammate, being a great coachable kid. But they start worrying what everybody else thinks about them. And when things go bad, guess what? They think everybody's thinking bad things about them, and then it starts this downward spiral. But maybe you can speak to that to our audience. I know a lot of the guys I've played with over the years, including myself and my son, that's what we had trouble with, is really caring too much what everybody else thought about us.
I will speak to that. I think we could go really deep, and I think we're going to do an episode where we really talk about being present. There's a common saying that people say back to me, which is, yeah, easier said than done, right? And I acknowledge that. I think a lot of things are simple. I use the term baby games. They're simple because there's not much to it. You just got to do it, right? But it's easier said than done because what are we working against? We're working against our habits, right? And our habits are comfortable. I had this conversation with someone today where we were recommending new things they could do. And they were saying, is it weird that I kind of like my old thing? And their old thing was more of a depressed state of mind. And I said, no, it's not weird at all. It's actually very normal because we're all just weighing this like pain versus pleasure. And even though there's pain in the depressed emotional state, it starts to become so normal to you. It's like liking the person who kidnapped you. After a while, you start to have an appreciation or like for them because they're providing some human need where you're having your needs met even when you're in a depressed state, because it becomes so normal to you that it's your habit, it's your go-to. We don't have to think about how to do it anymore. We just go there with our body and our mind lines up, and we're so good at being in that depressed state. So we easily go there, and that's more comfortable than doing the alternative. So going back to your question is for people to be able to not care about what others think. It's simple, but it's not easy because it takes you reconditioning your mind, telling yourself to stay present. And so stick on baseball for a second. It's the ability to face not just one at bat at a time, but one pitch at a time, to be able to swing and miss badly and then step out of the batter's box, step back in with a mind as if that never happened, where you face this pitch on a fresh perspective, in a neutral mindset, the ability to go at it as if there were no previous at-bats, there are no future at-bats, and there was not even a previous pitch. So that's the ultimate goal for everybody. And again, I acknowledge that is simple because there's nothing simpler than living in the present moment. And there's nothing simpler than taking batting, in this case, one pitch at a time. That's the simplest thing you could do. But that will take you time to start conditioning your mind where that is your approach and your mindset. And there's a term called ANTS. It stands for automatic negative thoughts. ANTS. And just like the annoying little bug, they can become very irritating because you wish they would go away, but they pop up. That's why they're called automatic negative thoughts. So even as you're working to condition this new way of thinking where you can approach an at bat one pitch at a time, or life one moment at a time, you're still going to have these automatic negative thoughts pop up. And if we're striving for perfection, which is unachievable, we're going to get down and go, see, this didn't work. It didn't work. I tried and I still had those things pop in my head. I was still thinking those thoughts because that's the way it works. They're automatic. But we allow ourselves this leeway, this patience to be able to go, that's normal. And now I go back. I allow my mind to go back to what I'm intending to happen, which is, okay, I face this pitch, this moment in time with whatever is the best mindset for me to have to give me the best opportunity to do my best.
That is perfect. And I always go back to practical implementation of what we are talking about. And I like to tell a lot of stories because that's how I learn. I remember I was walking up with my son and we were going to go watch Dallas Baptist play a game. And Dallas Baptist University has a really good baseball program. And I was watching this hitter. I just had walked in the stadium. I didn't know where they were in the lineup because the game had already started. And I looked down at him and I said, son, he's their best player. He probably is their cleanup hitter. And my son was like, how do you know? I said, just look at him. Just look at how he exudes confidence. He was in the on-deck circle. He was not batting. He was in the on-deck circle and he stood up straight. He looked like he was getting ready to go up there and kill it. He had his chest out, his head up. So, and he was, by the way, he was the cleanup hitter and he was their best hitter and he now plays in the big leagues. But I told my son, I said, that's where it starts at. You can practice that. So going back to my analogy of my younger nephew that I now teach batting lessons to, one of the things we did was we practiced how you do the pose. That's what we call it. I learned that term from you, but how you do the confidence pose and you stand confidently. Because once again, going back to our topic, the body tells the brain how you feel. So a lot of times it's getting those positive feedback mechanism from the body now going to the brain, which is giving you those good neurotransmitters that tells your brain, hey, we're confident, we feel good, we're going to go up and have a great day. And so we practice that in the dugout. I say I have him practice that in the on deck circle as he comes out of the dugout. And then he's been doing that. And the results are amazing. Now, I'm not going to say every time you do it and the first time you start it, but you can practice it and you can get better at it and it will improve your game. There's not going to be a downside effect to doing that, right? I mean, there's nothing negative that's going to happen from you acting confident in the on deck circle. So just start practicing it and doing it in your practice and then going out and doing it in a game. And you'll find there is a difference, but you do have to practice it. I think you recommend, Dan, even practicing in front of a mirror sometimes, doing a confidence pose where you practice doing what makes you feel confident.
What you're referring to, Dr. Dan, is from a TED Talk, and a woman named Amy Cuddy. And she had a question, or her thesis, and it was, what's the difference? What's the difference between the confident batter and the batter that you can tell is defeated before he even walked up to the plate? She wasn't using baseball, but that's the example, right? It's like, what's the difference between these two people? And her hypothesis was, I bet it has something to do with their body or their physiology. And this is something, again, that Tony Robbins has been teaching for years. Emotion is created through emotion, the use of the body. And that's what we're trying to keep harping on or ramming home here, is that, so what she taught was simply the difference is that the confident person tends to hold themselves the same way a superhero would hold themselves. So she called it the power pose. Like a superhero knows they have powers. And a superhero typically wears a cape. So she says that, well, how does a superhero stand with their cape on? They have, hands on their hips, chest out, shoulders back. And she said, if you just simply hold that pose for 2 minutes, what I say is that 2 minutes gives enough time for your body and your mind to align. That's where we started, right? We said the mind and body connection. So by simply standing like a superhero would stand with his cape on, hands on hips, shoulders back, chest out, and hold that for 2 minutes, your mind goes, I get it. You are a powerful person. You're like a superhero. So this perfect pharmacist, the mind, sends the chemicals through the blood and says, I'm going to allow you to feel powerful, unstoppable, confident, just like a superhero feels. So this isn't theory anymore. This is tested and proven. This is real. So going back to what Dr. Dan talked about, how do you use this? You might think it's cheesy, but I'll tell you, it's your willingness to do what others aren't, which gets you something that they'll never have. So your willingness to be so bold, to either in the dugout in baseball or on the on-deck circle, to be able to stand there before you take your practice swings and to just put your hands on your hips and pull your shoulders back and chest out. And I recommend smile and look up too. Just add 2 things to it. You do that and you hold that there for 2 minutes. Maybe it's the first thing you do. You walk out on that on-deck circle. And maybe that pitcher looks over and sees who's about to come up to bat. And just like you could recognize the better hitter from the not so good hitter, just like Amy Cuddy could recognize the leader in an office versus the person who just worked for the leader, that pitcher may be intimidated by you as they look over to that on deck circle and they see that person standing there in this power pose position, holding this posture and going, wow, I got to face that guy. Because what they see in you is the same thing that kindergartners could notice. That person is confident. And when they see that, your brain will align and produce the confident chemicals in your bloodstream. So as you step up to bat, that pitcher now may fear you, but you have the confidence you need to face him at your best and to give it your best. So again, this applies not just to baseball, not just to any sport we could go specific into, but to all of life. I break it down as simply to say that life, like sports, you have performance events. Performance events are like games or matches. They're a chance for you to demonstrate how good you are. It's when people are watching you, when they are comparing you to others, when they are judging you. That's life. That's how it works. So when you're going to go into your performance event, if you had one takeaway from this episode, my recommendation would be just simply use your body and allow your mind to align with your body So you go in with this perfect mind-body connection that allows you to perform at your best when it matters most during your performance event.
And I always do this in hitting and baseball, but it applies to all sports. In hitting, what we say to their young athletes, we say, pick your favorite hitter. He does something right, a lot of things right, to be the 1% of the 1% that got to where he was. Same thing in basketball. You can pick Michael Jordan. If you pick your favorite player, I want you to right now, if you pick Michael Jordan in basketball, or you pick Mike Trout in baseball, Albert Pujols, whoever you pick, go look at their images, how they stand and how they carry themselves. It is to a T what Dan just described. It's almost always head up, chest out, shoulders back, Superman pose, whatever you want to call it, superhero pose. But it does. We now know physiologically there is something that happens when your body acts a certain way that releases the positive neurotransmitters in your brain that then makes your brain feel like we're ready to go do whatever the task is that we're being asked to do. And then, you don't always have success, whatever that is. So you learn then that even though you don't have success in the moment, that you're so confident that it's like when Allen Iverson went 0 for 30 in a basketball game and they asked him one time, Allen, you just went 0 for 30. What are you going to do? Are you going to start passing it more, being a better assist guy? And he goes, 0 for 30. That just means I'm due. I know that's a little bit strange, but it's how the great ones think. When they have a down game, it doesn't affect who they are internally with their internal confidence. So be very confident in who you are and start posing that way if you don't feel that way, and your brain can change how you feel. So I think that's a very practical way of doing it. Go look at your favorite players. The Michael Jordan documentary, if you learned anything from watching that documentary, Michael Jordan's carried himself a certain way. He thought a certain way.
I want to come out with a statement. You're going to see this consistently from Dr. Dan and myself, which is we never want to be people who overpromise or make these amazing claims or guarantee anything. Here's the truth. Here's the truth behind all of it. I started out by saying that this matters. If there's one thing I teach you, it's this. It's to not just go, that makes sense, or maybe I agree with that, but to accept and agree. Now, the question is, how much does the mind affect the body? And nobody knows, right? There's a lot of subjectivity to like your opinion of how much it affects you. You'll hear people who have accepted and adopted and believe strongly in this tell you numbers that you'll say, really? They'll say 70% of performance is mental. 90% of performance is mental. Who knows is the real answer. I don't know. I could say I agree with a lot of those people. It is the majority. It's the major component. But let's just say for just a second, it's only 5%. Let's say the effect that the mind has on the body in your performance and whatever you do is only a 5% difference. Well, let's look at one statistic. In 2020, NCAA Division I baseball men's, we have the top ranked hitters based on batting average. The 50th ranked batting average in NCAA Division I was 421. If that batter, that athlete, had simply started to apply some of these mental principles that we're talking about today, and it only had a 5% impact on performance, in this case on their batting average, that 5% improvement would take them from a 421 batting average to a 442 batting average. That would raise them from the 50th ranked hitter in NCAA Division I men's baseball to the 23rd ranked hitter in NCAA Division I men's baseball. If that person was ready to be drafted, that 5% performance improvement in simply batting average in one category of performance could mean the difference between being drafted or not drafted, at what point they're drafted, their level of signing bonus, whether they start playing, how quickly they move through the ranks, how long their careers, all of that could be all of that could be impacted by simply a 5% performance improvement simply because they utilize these mental tools. So without promising the world, without promising a 70% change, a 90%, something extreme and that's hard to adopt, if you can simply adopt that the mind-body connection is real, that the mind and the body will affect performance if you accept how much mental training, these tools that we're talking about will help you, and you think, you know what, they will help me, but probably only by 5%, still do it. That 5% can make a big difference. So I encourage you, start using this stuff today.
Yogi Berra said it best when he said, baseball is 90% mental and the other half physical. So he had it nailed. He knew the numbers already, Dan. So that's the great Yogi Berra. So, but yeah, it does work. And it may seem, like Dan said earlier, it may seem cheesy, but I'm just telling you, I know now looking back at my career, and once again, I was an athlete for the first half of my career, and I'm a weekend warrior on the second half of my life. But dealing with athletes for the last 25 years, there is something different about the elite athlete, not just physically and not just with mechanics. You need to be a physical specimen and you need to be a good mechanical hitter. But if you do not pay attention to the mental side of it and the confidence side of it and the allowing your body to act a certain way so that your mind can then get the positive feedback, you will not be the best athlete that you can be. If you want to be the best athlete you can be, I'm just telling you what Dan taught me and what I've learned over my career is that this does work. So give it a try. It's not going to make you worse, right? That's what I used to always say as a doctor. We were like, do no harm. This is going to do no harm. Just go out and try putting some of the principles we talked about. Try doing the power pose. Try putting your body in a good position where you feel like you're going to be confident. Start telling yourself positive affirmation things. Start trying to change, adjust that negative little, devil that sits on your shoulder that tells you all the negative things about what you're doing and not the positive things. Just start trying to make those daily adjustments, get a little bit better every day, every week, every game, and it'll make a huge difference in your long-term career.
Everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to watch and listen to this podcast. We appreciate you. We hope you'll come back and listen to more episodes, and you enjoy the rest of your week.
What a fun show. Great to have you join us. We want to have you here with us every time we do a podcast. I really, truly believe this is life altering when you're talking about your athlete. As a parent, I wish I could go over and do it again with my son. As an athlete, I wish I could do it again as an athlete. So thank you so much for being part of today's show. And we look forward to having you on the next one as well.